welcome everyone. My name is Tom Mens. I'm a professor in software engineering here in the Faculty of Science. And my goal today is to try to provide you some tips and tricks to become a successful PhD student. Well, it's not up to me it will basically be your task to be successful as a PhD student. I'm just going to provide you some useful feedback of things that I have learned throughout my own PhD, also during my career when I was postdoc, and of course when I was professor, and I have been guiding PhD students myself. So it's a kind of lessons learned, and hopefully you will learn something out of it, not only for your PhD, but also for your future career, hopefully. So the main goal here, as I said, just is to provide you some advice, guidelines, tips and tricks for you as a PhD student to become more effective. What are the types of things that can help you in doing this? After my talk, if you want to know more, if you want to contact me, here's my email address. So you can always contact me by email, or you can, or any other channel where you can find me. So let me just maybe give a little bit of more background of me. So I already said I'm a professor at the software engineering lab. Actually, I've been working at the University of UMONS since 2003, so it's already quite a long time. I did my PhD way too long ago, between 1993 and 1999, at the University in Brussels, the Flemish one, the VUB. After this, I became a postdoc researcher for 3 years plus 1 year of project funding. This was as the FWO, which is the counterpart of the FNRS. And then I became a first assistant, then associate, and then full professor at this university since 2003. Actually, since the beginning, I have been the leader of the software engineering lab here at the university, at the Faculty of Science. PhD-wise, here I've just listed the last generation, or like the last 10, 12 years of PhD students that I have been, I have had the honor to guide. Most of them, well, the right part they already defended, the left part these are ongoing. Hopefully these two will defend like in 2025, and these might be a little bit later because they just started. So this shows you that I already have quite some experience with guiding PhD students successfully, since they all, at least on the right-hand side, they all already successfully defended. Maybe to start with, just to get to learn you as well, this presentation will be interactive. So I don't know if you have any computer-like device with you. Can be a smartphone, can be anything else, smart laptop or whatever. If you don't, if the resolution is not enough to scan this, you can just type this on whatever machine you have. Okay, maybe I have to activate it because. Okay, so you have a pretty good balance between first year PhD students, second year, third year, so that's good. I just wanted to know this to know how to balance my presentation. Some tips are more useful in the beginning, others are more useful in the end. Okay, good. Well, you can continue to fill in if you didn't do it yet. Another one, maybe another question just to get acquainted with you is this one. In which faculty or school do you conduct your PhD research? So let me just open that question. So, mostly engineering, medicine, and pharmacy. So I expect this to be reflecting the amount of PhD students available more or less in each faculty. Okay, so now that I have already some information from you, let me start with the real presentation. So, okay, as you probably are already aware as a PhD student, it's not always easy to be a PhD student. You have to be kind of a juggler, trying to get lots of balls in the air at the same time. So you have to do lots of different activities. You need to have technical skills, social skills, whatever. You have to do maybe teaching, a little bit of research, maybe some administration, maybe do something related to companies. Can be lots of different things. So that's one of the most difficult challenges, I think, as a PhD student. You can replace these balls of any specific type of activity that you have to do, and you will, well, I don't think there will be any case where you don't have to like be a juggler with these, trying to keep different balls in the end and keep them all in the air, which is difficult if you're not a juggler. The first time you try to do this is something you have to learn, right? That's as a PhD student. If you're a postdoc, I think the situation is a little bit more worse because you have to be a juggler with lots of different balls in your hands. And maybe there is an audience beyond, around you, like in a circus, where people are all looking at you at the same time, which makes it a little bit more stressful. And okay, this even becomes worse if you become a professor or a professional, where like you have to like juggle 20, 25 balls in the air at the same time. Occasionally, you have to try to, while doing this, pick up some other ball and start juggling with this, or maybe some ball falls on the ground. You have to pick it up while all the others still have to be in the air. So that's the kind of situation. So I think you can consider yourself happy that you're only in this very simple case right now. Maybe yet another question here, just to see. Okay, what are like the specific qualities you think you should have, or abilities that you should have to become a successful PhD student? I'm not talking about the skills you have to learn as a PhD student, but really abilities, qualities that a successful PhD student should have. So I will already open the question here. So this is a little bit more open-ended. So okay, for quality, ability, anything like that ends with "it" is probably a good quality. So try to be short and have one single noun for each answer. If you think of multiple qualities, you can add them all. Okay, I see that. Okay, we start seeing some questions. I will do it with a word cloud, because there might be a lot of variation in the types of things you see. So I expect that probably, yeah, like. Because you don't always use the same word. You have organized, organization, organized. So yeah, it's normal that we see the same words appearing. I will clean this up to have it later more differently. But okay, we already see some qualities that will probably appear. I will show you the results I got from the last time I gave this presentation, and I don't expect this to be very different. So you can continue to add more words like this if you can think of something. I will show you the results that I got from a previous time I gave this. And I think based on a quick look I have made on the word cloud, most of the things that you mentioned are there. So you have to be persistent, perseverant, resilient. That's kind of the same things. Curious, open, ambitious. You have to have ambition, passionate, motivated. If you're more in the scientific domain, have critical thinking, scientific attitude, open-minded, be a problem solver, be structured, responsible, autonomous, independent, honesty, integrity. So there is lots and lots of qualities that can help you in being a good PhD student. I hope and assume you have many of those. Okay, so this is about like qualities, abilities that you should have, preferably many of those when starting a PhD. Now, this question is slightly different. It's like, okay, when you're doing your PhD, you will also acquire new skills. You will acquire new skills, and you should acquire new skills. So it's about like, what are the types of skills that you think are necessary, that you need to acquire to successfully do your PhD, and also which are the skills that you will naturally acquire while doing your PhD, and that might be like secondary skills that could be useful like for your further career, even if it's not your specific goal. Well, what we already see is lots of managerial skills, like time management, stress management. Oops, sometimes it goes away because it's switched. Every time there's a new question, it reorders the Wordle. Time management, stress management, project management, management in general, So that's clearly the managerial skills. Then, of course, everything that's related to social skills like communication. Leadership is also a kind of managerial skill. And then, of course, since you're doing most likely a technical PhD or something related to science, you will have all these theoretical technical skills, scientific skills, technical skills, scientific rigor. So that's the type of things that I was expecting to see. Actually, here there is a kind of discrepancy between what, like, trying to explain to, I don't know if you already tried to explain what you're doing in your PhD to your mother or your grandmother or some other family member or some friends. And then probably, okay, even when I try to explain this to my wife, I don't manage to do this. So basically, when you typically try to explain your PhD or even your research after this to someone else that is not necessarily in a scientific domain, they will say, okay, you're an expert in a particular discipline, which is probably the case. So you're really an expert in a particular discipline. And that's probably what people think that you learn during a PhD. You will become a world leader, expert in a very narrow scientific or other domain. So yes, that's definitely something you learn in a PhD. But this is just a very small part of the big picture, because what you actually learn when you're doing a PhD, this is this. Okay, you have this expert knowledge, but like, okay, in this case, I don't know the exact percentages, but I have put all of the different types of things that you will learn, that you have to master during your PhD. Okay, you will have this expert knowledge, but you have to have good reading skills. You have to read scientific papers all the time. Writing skills, you will have to write papers. You will have to write a PhD dissertation, of course. Communication skills, we already saw it in the word cloud. Everyone, half of you mentioned this as an important skill. Presentation skills, okay, that's kind of the same thing. Not necessarily, because communicating is about how you will talk to other people about your research. Presentation is how you will disseminate your scientific research. So you can do communication for many different reasons, not only for presenting your research. Collaboration, all of this is like the social skills. I think social skills is even here. I didn't really structure it in a good way. Project management, time management, you already mentioned this before. Critical thinking, problem solving, technical skills. So I think everything that I have seen on the word cloud, it's here. These are all of the types of things that you will learn during your PhD, and most of them will actually be useful in whatever job that you're going to do after your PhD, regardless of whether it's a scientific or it's a job in academia or in industry. So yeah, the reading is obvious. You have to constantly be aware of the state of the art and the state of practice within your domain. So you have to keep aware of the scientific literature. The writing is also obvious. You have to basically, whenever you write a PhD dissertation or a paper, you will have to write something. You will get probably occasionally, maybe even frequently, negative reviews from the reviewers that read your paper. And then you have to try to revise your paper to make it better, and so on. So it's really something that you learn from the beginning until the end. If I take most of my PhD students, when they start their PhD, they are very bad writers, and at the end they become either good writers to excellent writers. So it's something that's not easy to master and something that needs a lot of time to do this. Same for presentation skills. It's something you learn by doing. It's not something that you can master if you don't have enough experience. So if you're not a good reading, it's probably the easy part. But if you're not a good writer or presenter, the only good ways to do this is to practice and try to really take every occasion you can to do this. You shouldn't be afraid of this. It can be stressful, but by doing it, you will reduce the stress level little by little. What is the real reason why you actually started? Why did you want to start doing a PhD? What is your driver behind it? Why do you want to do this? There can be many different reasons why you actually want to do a PhD. I think and I expect that many of the reasons you're going to provide is related to some of the things you mentioned before. If you want to do a PhD, the most important thing, I think, is motivation. If you're not motivated to do a PhD, then it will be difficult to always keep in mind the big picture, and you will probably have difficulties to continue doing this. So having a good motivation is very important. So I just wanted to know, what are the different motivations you had? It can be one single motivation. Maybe you have two different main drivers that allow you to do a PhD. Okay, so I see some of the questions that are like, you already like think further ahead, okay, because you want to have a fulfilling career. So I guess this is after the PhD. You want to remain within, I assume this, I'm not sure. You have this, you have academic career. So this is like having a long-term goal in mind, probably because you enjoy science a lot, you enjoy doing research, and that's why you want to do this all of your time. I guess that you will probably see the same, yeah, here. Same here, research. Okay, here I see thesis. Okay, if your driver is to have a thesis, maybe there should be something more than just, I'm doing a PhD because I want to have a PhD thesis. I think there should be something more than just, the end goal of a PhD thesis should not be the thesis itself. This is just a starting point. You also have to think a little bit further ahead. Once you have your PhD thesis, what is the next step in your career? Okay, becoming an expert in your domain, that's probably because you like the domain a lot and you want to share your knowledge with other people. Or it can be because like, okay, you have solve a societal problem, solve a health problem. You really want to, in a specific domain, be helpful in some way. So yeah, actually all of these are of the same nature. Solve a societal problem, solve real world problems, solve a health problem. You are probably very interested in one specific domain, which might be science, health, law, whatever, and you want to actually help other people by sharing your knowledge and to become better in this knowledge. So here, again, I list some of the answers I got from previous presentations that I gave. One of them is basically just because you're curious, you want to learn new things. So this is the first one, scientific curiosity. Because you really say, I'm really passionate about research. Research is what I want to do. It's something that I cannot live without doing research. So the best way for me to do this is to actually get a PhD scholarship and to do this all of the time. I like to learn. I like to discover new things. So if this is your passion and you would like to do this, then of course it's obvious that you're doing a PhD. So it gives you a sense of self-fulfillment. It's a kind of a vocation. The other one is, okay, yeah, you want to create new knowledge. We also saw this in the Wordle clouds. So you want to become an expert, what we saw, an expert. You want to solve complex problems. You want to expand the state of the art in your particular domain of research. So that's about, okay, the intellectual challenge. And then, of course, the other one, I saw this a little bit less in the word cloud, but like you want to self-development, you want to increase not only your knowledge in a specific domain, but if you remember this pie chart, all of the other skills. You want to be able to learn new skills. You want to, for example, to become a better teacher. So all of these secondary skills, this could also be an important driver. Maybe this is not, I don't say you have to have all of these drivers. It's just some examples, but I know, for example, sometimes I have PhD students that are like doing 100% of research, and that's really what they like. And then I have others that say, no, I cannot do only 100% research. I want to do a bit of research. I also want to do teaching. I also want to do some project level programming, whatever. And in that case, they want to have like more diversity in the types of things they're doing, because you cannot always focus on exactly the same thing at the same time. And in that case, like this self-development and trying to become a good teacher and not only a good researcher could also be something good. Now, let me start now with providing you some practical advice, because that was the purpose of today. I think the most practical advice that I can give you and that I give to all my PhD students is this one: have a good thesis statement. So basically, what is a thesis statement? I don't know if you already have one or if you plan to have one. For me, if you write a PhD dissertation, the first chapter, the introduction of your dissertation, should basically say what is the main goal of this research. What is it that you have done during this career of 4 years of research? So one sentence, 2 sentences that explains the main idea of your entire 4 years of research. I'm assuming here, I'm just taking by default 4 years. It could be 3 years, it could be more, depending on how long your PhD contract is. any type of research that you're doing has to have a main goal and a main ID. So it's a kind of one sentence thing that explains what the reader expects to see in the dissertation. So I make a distinction between the term thesis, which is this one sentence goal, and the dissertation, which is the document in which you write everything you did to come towards this goal. So one sentence that highlights what is the main idea of the dissertation, what is the goal of this dissertation, and how do you plan to reach this goal? So that's why it's actually very difficult. How can you summarize your entire dissertation of maybe 200 pages in one single sentence? But this is very important because it's like a typical elevator pitch. If you can explain what you're doing in just one sentence, I'm saying just one sentence, but if you have 3 sentences, that's perfect for me too, then you have a really focused thing that you can easily sell to someone and that also helps you to go forward. I'm not saying that you should have this thesis statement in the beginning from the outset. It might even be that this can slightly evolve, but you shouldn't wait until like 2 months before submitting your manuscript to come up with this thesis statement. Especially because it depends on if you have really a focused way of working or if you tend to be like more diverging and you want to work on different things. Having this focus on a specific direction and goal is important, because then like if you do maybe you do some side research to not always do the same thing, then you know, okay, is this part of my main dissertation or not? If it's not, then probably you shouldn't focus too much effort on that part. This is something typically that you cannot do by yourself. You have to talk to your colleagues or to your PhD thesis advisor about it. Maybe if you're lucky, your thesis advisor will come up with this, but ideally I would say it's better that you come up with this type of summary yourself. So the earlier you come up with such a good thesis statement, the better it is, because this provides you the general thread towards how to improve your dissertation, and also it helps the reader for understanding what you're doing, especially because now, like in University of Mons, it's required to have every year progress report committee meeting, where you have to say how did you do this year and how will you continue to advance. If you have this specific thesis statement, it becomes much easier, because you say, this is my statement, this is what I'm supposed to do, this is what I already did towards this goal, and this is what I continue to do towards this goal. If you don't have such a thesis statement, it might be much more difficult to convince people about what you did. Let me again come back to you and ask you for some advice. So depending on whether you're in where you are in your career, I think you can already say, like, there is specific things during my PhD career that I have already encountered that were maybe difficult and where I was facing a particular problem. And how did you face this problem? So I don't know if you can think of, if you cannot think of anything, then okay, that's it, so be it. But if you have like specific important advice that you think can be valuable for your colleagues here in the room, you can always share this. Try to think of something that's not necessarily any of the skills or abilities you had before, just some specific advice where you say this can be valuable for someone else as well. Okay, let's see already what we got until now. I see there's some very relevant advice, most of it. Life outside of, okay. I don't know if I can fix the order so that it doesn't change all the time. Maybe, okay, stop answering now so that the list will stay stable. Okay, speak of your difficulties, that's important. Whenever you're facing some difficulty, it doesn't matter which one, try to talk about it as soon as you can to someone. Depending on what is the difficulty you're facing, the person that you want to talk about could be someone else. It could be your advisor if it's some specific research-oriented, research-related one. Maybe you have a difficulty with your advisor. In that case, probably you should talk to someone else, maybe from the lab or maybe some colleagues. Or there is also someone in the in the AVG, the research department, the research and development department that can help you as well. Okay, this as well, this is a relevant one. So, yeah, if you want to have progress, try to have regular meetings with your advisors. Okay, we all know that advisors are not always available, so that's one of the main problems. And it's not because, in most cases, it's not because your advisors don't want to talk to you, it's they simply don't have the time. So there one way of doing this is to, well, first discuss with your advisors about what is the best way of having regular feedback. You could even say, like, we fix a specific date in the week, or if you wanted to have two weekly meetings, so that we can fix these things. So if it's in their agenda, it's much more likely. If you just say, no, I will wait in my office until they come and then I will talk to them, then it's more unlikely that you will have enough time to discuss with this. So planning the meetings ahead of time with your advisors could be useful. So weekly progress meetings would be ideal. Maybe this doesn't work. At least once every month, but preferably more than that would be good. To avoid the fact that your advisor, after 1 month, he says, okay, I wasn't aware that you were doing this, you shouldn't have done this. So the earlier you talk to him or her about what you have been doing, the better it is. Yeah, so I think that's also, yeah, if you have meetings with your advisors, you can talk about the problems you're currently facing research-wise. Starting to read from your first year of thesis, okay, you have to constantly be aware of what's out there. So reading and knowing about your field of research is really very important. It's not only reading for me, it could be like maybe if you're more in a technical domain, knowing the new technology, if you're in a computer science domain, knowing the new tools. So it can be like knowing what is the latest state of the art and state of the practice in research. That's very important, and it's starting from the beginning but until the end. In the beginning it's much more important because you don't even know your field, but it will stay important, especially to avoid that you're doing something that someone else is already doing, or even worse, someone else has already done. So that you should probably avoid. This is like having a good balance, family life, work-life balance. So don't only focus on what your research is. Try to make some me time with your family, with your friends, doing some sports, doing some other cultural activities, whatever. So this needs to be planned in as well. This we already had. Okay, this is time management. So if you are bad in respecting a schedule, maybe using a calendar and respecting this calendar could be good. The same here, don't procrastinate if there are things that you have to do, but it's difficult, you don't like to do this. This doesn't mean you should say, like, let's do this next week. Just try to do them. Okay, being curious, that's not really an advice. Okay, it's one of the things we already seen before, so of course you need it. Read like a reviewer. Yeah, it's also an interesting one. Read like a reviewer. So this actually means that when you're reading a paper, okay, you do it for two different reasons. To keep your knowledge within the domain, but sometimes also to know how actually do other people write papers that have been accepted. If you have a paper, you read a paper and it's a good paper, see how it has been written. If it has been written, it has already been peer-reviewed, it has been published, and probably it means that they did something good. Otherwise, it wouldn't not have been accepted. Maybe it's good, but maybe it's not perfect. So maybe you could say, okay, if I would have written this paper, I could have done it better. These are the types of things that I could do better. So actually something that I'm currently giving as a kind of task to my PhD student is whenever there is a new interesting paper they read, I'm giving them a kind of reviewer template. I want them to report, okay, you read this paper, I would like you to report to me about the contents of this paper because I don't know about this, it's a new paper that I encounter, but please try to do this by filling in this reviewer template because this gives you two different insights. First of all, you will have to read the paper anyway to understand what it's doing, and like this you can also like act as a reviewer and try to be more critical about the contents of the paper. So this could be a good guideline, especially if during your PhD you also become a reviewer. It's more likely that you will be a reviewer during your postdoc career if you do one. But it's also like in this way you can learn this skill of being critical and constructively review other works. The other one that's also interesting, at some point you should stop reading. Okay, this means that you should not focus 100% on reading only. It's not about stopping to read. You should never stop reading, but you should like spend a minimum, only a fraction of your time on reading. So if you say, no, this is related to the procrastination, to try to avoid saying like I'm spending all of my time on reading, just say if you feel that you're spending too much time on reading, just say I'm going to limit my time to maximum, I don't know, 1 day in the week reading, and everything else I'm going to focus on my research. In that case, you can say this is a threshold above which I should not go for the reading activities. This one is also very useful. I had it later on my slides, but I can already talk about this. Not taking critics personally. Whenever you talk about your research to your advisor, or whenever you submit your paper and you want it to get accepted, it's likely that either your advisor says, no, I don't think that's a good idea, or I would do it differently, or for submitted papers it's even worse. The reviewer will be much more critical and might say, I don't like this. Well, hopefully he's friendly, he or she is friendly, but might say, you should probably, I'm rejecting this paper for this and this reason. So it is, there is always good, valid reasons. Normally, if a reviewer rejects your work, it's for a good reason, normally. And in that case, you should accept the criticism and try to learn from it and not be personally offended by this, but like to see, okay, what is the reason behind it? What is the reason why this, I get this rejection, and try to learn from this and not see this as a personal thing. The most important thing is whenever you get reviews that are negative, try to see behind the reasons for this and trying to see what can I improve to make it less negative next time. Now I can finally go to the more specific advices. So we already, the first one was have a good PhD thesis statement. The other one is like take responsibility for your actions. What do I mean by this? It's basically like no one else will write the PhD thesis for you. No one else will do your research. It's your responsibility. So it's like related to this procrastination. If you don't do things, if you don't work constantly, if you don't spend effort in doing your PhD, you will not get much out of it. So the more effort you spend in doing your PhD, the more likely it is that you will get a PhD and you will get a good PhD. Yeah, the planning, so time management. That's also important, and that's maybe something that's like sometimes overlooked in the sense that, of course, you have to plan ahead of time and you have to know what you're doing. The most challenging part here is to know how to plan at different time frames at the same time, because you will have to do short-term planning, you have to do medium-term planning, and you will have to do long-term planning all at the same time. Examples of short-term planning is like every year there is probably one or several major conferences or workshops in your field. You want to submit papers to this. So this means that already like 1 year before you have to say, okay, I know that, I don't know, in November there will be a conference submission deadline. Starting from this, start counting backwards. This means that I have to start working at least 2 months, probably more in advance, to start working to some results. It depends on how much experiments you have to do. Maybe you have to work like 9 months in advance already to be able to reach this deadline and to have any success of getting accepted. So this is short-term planning, but short-term is still several months ahead of time. If you just don't do this and you just happen to know like 2 weeks before deadline, oh, there is this conference coming up, then you can forget about it. Except if you still have some paper floating around so that you can directly submit. But it's much less likely that you will get accepted simply because you started working too late. There's probably other examples of short-term deadlines that we can add here. Medium term. In medium term, for you it's probably long term. For those that start a PhD, for me it's medium term. This is your PhD itself. When will you defend your PhD? This is medium term in the sense that it will be maximum 4 years, probably sooner for most of you. But yeah, so it's medium term. Long term is what happens after your PhD. That's the long-term vision. During your PhD, still slightly shorter than your PhD itself is research visits of longer duration. Say you want to, during your PhD, do a visit at some research lab abroad. It can be a 1 to 3 months, maybe 6 months research visit. It's not something that you can just decide from one day to the other, because first of all, you probably need research funding for this. Research funding for these types of longer stay visits take time to get. There is probably specific deadlines for submitting these research proposals to get the funding. You also have to have the approval of your advisor. You have the approval of the lab that you're going to visit. So this typically takes like 1 year ahead of time easily to be able to plan this, because you also have to fit this with whatever other research, or maybe you have to do some teaching. You have to make sure that your teaching load will be reduced during that visit. So that's something that needs to be planned ahead of time, but here it's longer term than this one. This is like a couple of months. This is maybe sometimes 1 year or longer. Also, again, with your PhD, I'm not sure if this is valid for all different types of domains, but whenever I ask one of my PhD students, how long do you plan to write the actual writing of your PhD dissertation once all the material is there? So say the researcher has already published 3, 4 different papers, and then they say, okay, now the only thing that I need to do is to bundle everything together in a PhD dissertation. So I ask them how much time that will take. They say, oh no, easily 1 month. I say, no, I don't think it will be 1 month. I say, okay, maybe 2 months. No, it will not be 2 months. So in the best case, they might say 3 months, but out of experience, I see it always takes somewhere between 3 and 6 months, and 6 months is much more usual. So it's something that takes time because you have several revisions. It's not just bundling a couple of papers together, and it needs to be revised with several iterations where your PhD advisor needs to approve this. So it takes time to do this properly. So definitely don't underestimate this, and don't start doing this last minute. Also, of course, you can reduce this time if you start focusing from the beginning on the writing, but from the beginning it might be difficult because you don't necessarily already know what you're going to write in the beginning. So the long term, as I mentioned, is everything after the PhD. So what are you going to do? It depends. Maybe you envision some academic career, or you envision some professional career. In both cases, the type of planning you want to do might be different. For example, if you want to become a professional in some company, it might be useful that during your PhD career, you already have established some contacts with companies. You already collaborate with companies during your PhD. If you want to do an academic career, then you should do all of the things that are valued in academy. So I mentioned here research visits of longer duration. Research mobility is considered as something good. So if this is something you want to do, then make sure that you have done at least some decent research mobility abroad, that you have good research collaborations, that you have good papers, and so on. So we already saw about the practical advice for keeping focus. I've seen this several times in some of your answers. So it's about planning and targeting. So I think the main way of keeping focused on the end result, which will be your PhD dissertation, is exactly this thesis statement that I mentioned before. If you have your thesis statement, this thesis statement is already set. This is the goal. This is the direction I want to go to, and you can always work towards this goal. And whenever you start doing something that doesn't really fit in this goal, you should probably avoid doing it too much. So try to not deviate too much from the goal. From time to time, it can be useful, like you have maybe some other colleague or some collaborator you want to work with, and they do some really cool research, and you just want to be involved in this. It's okay, but just consider this as a sidetrack, and don't let it spend too much of your time to do this sidetrack. Always say, okay, my main goal is the most important. This is the thing on which I'm going to spend most of my time. Another way of keeping your focus is to really structure whatever you're doing, structure your thoughts, structure your daily work, structure your writing, structure your code. Structuring, this can be keeping an agenda. Structuring can also be, I don't know, for your code. Well, if you're a developer, then having well-structured code, readable code is very important. For your writing, having always the same structure that you're going to use the proper tools for doing this. So be structured. If you're just whenever you have an idea, you just write it on some piece of paper, and then 2 years later you discover this piece of paper somewhere in an office. You say, maybe I should have written it down somewhere on my computer. Okay, another way to keep your focus, it's impossible to always keep your focus, because we all know that doing research is a very intensive activity that takes a lot of brain power, resources, and your brain can simply not manage to do this all of the time. So it requires a lot of concentration, and after some time your brain gets tired and you cannot continue concentrating. In that case, what should you do? You should basically replace this very activity that requires a lot of concentration by some more lightweight activities that require less concentration. For example, if you're thinking about a research problem, it might be very difficult. Just writing down some ideas might be easier. Or you could also say, after some very concentrated effort, you can say, now I'm going to do some sports and to walk around somewhere to do some more lightweight activities. I talked about these loose ends. It's not a problem to have them, but don't do this too much. But it's okay to have side tracks, because it's again another way of if you're working 100% of your time on exactly the same topic, you will probably get bored by doing so. So if you have a side track, sometimes it helps you to do something else, and then by doing something else, and then you go back to your main track, then you suddenly sometimes get new ideas because you have let it go for a while. Yeah, the other thing is about tracking or tracing, keeping track of everything that you're doing. So of course it's related to research, so about state of the art of research. Whenever you encounter something, you have to read lots of things, and you have to know what is the technology being used in your field of research. So you have to keep track of this. It's not only sufficient to read all of these things, you also have to remember what you read. If I'm reading something like things that I read 3 years ago, if I didn't write down somewhere what is the main takeaways, the main takeaway messages of whatever I read in a paper like 3 years ago, I will probably not know anymore today. So what you should try to do is, whenever you have read a paper, either you take the paper, you have some bibliography management tool in which you store all your papers. Maybe you like to annotate them manually using whatever type of device you have. Maybe you want to have at the side for every paper a small text document in which you write your main takeaway messages like this. Whenever you say, like 2 years later, I want to know what was the main thing about this paper, just read whatever you wrote about it at the moment you read the paper to know whether it's still relevant. Otherwise, you will have to reread the same papers over and over again, because since you're reading so much papers, your mind simply cannot remember everything. So note down whatever you had that you think is relevant. This is not only for papers, also for any technology. Also, whenever you have a new research idea or you see a potential opportunity, just write it down. It might be useful somewhere. So have some kind of research notebook, preferably in an electronic form, in which you write up all of these ideas. Some people like to have an electronic form. Some people like to have a really a book, a paper book, where they write everything down. This depends on what you want to have. But have some way to write down everything. Also, when you're talking to your research advisor, your PhD advisor, the same. Don't just listen to him, but whenever he's talking to you about something, write down whatever he says, because otherwise next meeting maybe he says the same thing, or even worse, maybe he says something completely different. So maybe today he says you should do this, and then next week he said you should do that, and it's the opposite of what you said. So if you keep it, keep track of it, then you can at least know whether it's inconsistent. And okay, this writing down, this can be on paper. It can also be like sometimes some of my students, they like to simply record the meetings if you have, of course, the permission of your whoever you're talking to. And then you have a video recording or a voice recording of your meetings, so that you can always go back to it if there are some details. Because during meetings there is a lot of things that are said. It's impossible to remember everything. Another reason for keeping track of things is because I assume that this is for all of you the case. You have to write an annual, maybe not, I don't know how it's, but for us in science we have to write an annual committee meeting report. And it's based on this that we will have our annual committee meetings. So these annual reports about the progress need to be written rather than just thinking about this like 1 week before the report is due, and then you have to start really focusing on this a lot and spend all of your time on this. It's better to do this gradually and regularly so that once the time is there, you already have most of it written. Same for your CV. From time to time, you will have to submit your CV to someone. If like during 4 years, you didn't do anything, and then you have to try to think about what was all of the things I did, it might be difficult to complete your CV. If you just start from the beginning and keep noting down everything, it will be much more easy to do this. I already mentioned mobility, so research mobility. This is very important, both in research and both in academia and in industry. So actually try to take whatever opportunity you can have to travel and to reach out to people. Okay, during the COVID, it was a little bit more difficult. Now it's again has become possible. Okay, and this like mobility can take place in many different ways. The easy ways are like you want to attend scientific conferences, scientific workshops, seminars, summer schools. It can be abroad in another country. It can be just in another university within the same country. So you have all of this counts as traveling for me, and it is also a way to connect to other people. Also related to this, I think that's maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not, but for me, like going to a conference, what is the main reason for going to conferences? It's not for listening to boring talks. Okay, there will be presentations. Sometimes the presentations are quite interesting. The papers themselves, you can just take the proceedings and read them when you come back. The most important things about these scientific events is actually the ability to talk to other people. So during your coffee breaks, during the social events, that's really the most important things about conferences. That's actually the main reason why conferences exist. Researchers want to talk to other researchers about their research and to know about the research of others. In most of the cases, research collaborations, they are created during these types of events. And also, most of the useful information you can get during these conferences is because of the things you heard during these coffee breaks, during these social dinners, and so on. Because there you get to know information that you will never learn by just listening to a presentation, because a presentation is really condensed and they only tell you the relevant things about what worked. But sometimes, like if you know you maybe have a specific idea and someone else already tried it and they said you can forget about this because this doesn't work for this and this reason. They might tell you this orally during some informal talk, but like the things that didn't work, probably they are not going to spend their time during a real official presentation about this. Okay, it might be difficult. I also, when I try to remember my very first conference, just trying to reach out to people and talk to some some high-level professor. You are all afraid of doing this. Actually, I don't think this depends on the field, but you shouldn't be afraid of doing this. Conferences are a friendly atmosphere. People do like to talk to other people. Even if you're just a PhD student and you want to talk to some researcher that has a really high profile, they are probably eager to talk to you about whatever you want to do. It's mostly problematic if you're like a more an introvert person, as I am, as I used to be. Okay, I'm no longer afraid to talk to 40 persons in the room anymore. My very first presentation, I was extremely afraid of talking. It's something I learned along the way. So maybe if it's difficult for you to get introduced in a new community, especially your very first conference, ideally, hopefully your PhD advisor will be there. Maybe there are some other colleagues that are there that can help you introduce the community. But maybe even if your PhD advisor is not there, he can maybe help you to already introduce you up front before the conference to the right people and say, have a chat with this person and maybe already have some email to say, okay, when you're going there, my PhD student will talk to you. So this can be also a way to help you in doing this. So the main reason for this these scientific events is to meet like-minded people with whom you can discuss about your research, and maybe also like complain about your PhD advisor. I can probably also recommend everyone, if you didn't already do so, is to go like to most of these conferences. They have a PhD symposium.
Where you actually, in the context of the conference, in a specific field, there is a specific track where PhD students can present their research. And it's really focused on PhD students, and then most of the other persons there are also PhD students, so then you can freely talk about your research, complain about everything that doesn't go.
It's also a really good way, these events, is to increase your visibility. If people have never seen you, it might be difficult to get collaborations by going there. Even if they know your work, if they see you, it's much more easy to get new collaborations. Or to have people cite your work. Probably the best way to do so is to attend workshops and not only conferences. Workshops are much more smaller scale, even more focused, but there you have really all the persons in your very specific niche, your research domain, where you can talk about this. Something that really helped for me also when I was doing this was actually trying to be involved as a co-organizer in workshops. And in that case, if you have this opportunity, please do so, because in this case, you get to know other people, you get organization skills, and people know you because you're a co-organizer, and you get all of the benefits from doing this. So this was lots of things about mobility. And then, of course, the other mobility, except for going to scientific events, is having research visits in labs abroad. So ideally, it should be like, okay, it depends on how much budget you have or how much time you have. It can be, ideally, I would say a 3-month visit is the best compromise, because then, like this, you have enough time to be immersed in this lab. 1 month might be a little bit too few, because by the time 1 month is gone, you really get to know the people, and then you have to go away back to your university. But it's still better than nothing. 6 months is probably even better, but that can be too much time in the context of only a 4-year career. So, but it's definitely recommended to have something like this. But again, you have to plan well ahead of time, and you have to identify, of course, the research lab that is most relevant for your domain of research, that perhaps your PhD advisor has already collaborations with. Perhaps it can lead to a new research collaboration. So identifying the right lab is very important. Once you go there, it will increase your mobility. As a result, it will increase your CV. It will be good for your academic career. It will also be good for your social skills. You will be involved in a new environment. There's only benefits of doing this. Sometimes you could even consider smaller research visits for really specific activities. So here just one anecdotal evidence of this. This is a picture of one of my PhD students a couple of years ago. Here on the left, it's Adrien Coppens. He was working in the domain of using virtual and augmented reality in the context of building architecture. So it's a kind of mix between science, applied science, and architecture. And to do so, he needed to have all of this fancy material, like you can here see this stable device, which is actually a tactile device where you can put things on it and you can interact with it. And at the same time, you can see around the entire floor there is a 360 screens where you can project things and you can interact with them. So it's really fancy equipment, so fancy that it costs a huge amount of money. We didn't have the money at our university, so we tried to identify where do they have these types of things, because that was really his domain. He wanted to do research in that particular domain. So we identified the lab in Luxembourg, the LIST list, where they had this equipment. It allowed him to do this experience. He could use this to put this in his PhD dissertation. And as an end result of this, okay, he got his PhD with one collaboration on top of this with these partners. And actually, it was even more successful than this, because currently, after his PhD, he's now working at that institute as a developer in this domain. He didn't want to stay in research, but he's still doing it as a developer within a really active research domain. Yeah, maybe go back to our poll. So now I'm talking about software or other technical tools. So as a PhD student, you are probably likely to use some kind of tooling in the general sense for doing your PhD. Think about any type of tool, software tool, hardware tool, any type of other technical tool that you can think of that are indispensable, really needed for you as a PhD student within your domain of study. I expect probably to see a mix of like generic tools that will be useful for everyone, and then more specific tools that can be useful in only your specific domain of research. Okay, so the obvious ones are, of course, any type of document writing tool, Word, LaTeX, or something like this. The other things are spreadsheets, Excel, or the equivalents of Excel. Any type of reference management tool. Okay, here we see reference management, here we see Mendeley, EndNote, anything about managing your scientific references, obviously, is related to what I mentioned before, keeping track of all of your references. Something for publishing, like your data sets, like Zotero. Specific tools for scientific computing, or SPSS. These are more specific in specific domains. Any tools for doing scientific analysis, for statistical analysis. So there is a mix of focus tools within your domain. I don't see any like, of course we have everything new here. I was expecting this. I didn't have this like last year when I presented it, but any type of AI tool, you're doomed to use this for some reason. Try to use this in the best way possible and know about the limitations of this. Don't trust ChatGPT for anything. You can use it, but don't trust it. So I will give you some examples. No, I'm not sure if, I will also give you examples in my specific fields, but in any specific fields, there is like tools like this that can be extremely useful. Yeah, so this is like the last time I gave this presentation, I got these types of results. It's okay, there was already apparently ChatGPT, so that's good. So here we said this was more in a computer science field. So there we see other types of things like, okay, this is some kind of database tooling. This is Stack Overflow, VS Code for software development. So obviously in that domain you see much more software development related, but all of the other things are very similar. Bibliography tools, Zotero, LaTeX, calendar reference managers, and so on. So that's obvious that, but the main practical advice is to use the right tools for the right purpose, which means also to know what are the tools available in your domain. Maybe the recommendations I'm going to give here are not the ones that are valid in your domain, but the best way to know this is talk to your colleagues about what is the tools they are using and try to select the best one. So maybe obvious ones that you didn't list, but that are also extremely relevant is a backup mechanism. Any type of backup, I would say the best one is just have some kind of external hard drive that you link to your computer every week, maybe even every day, to have an automatic backup, which is not on the cloud, which is not on your computer itself, but that allows you to have a backup. I can tell you many stories of PhD students or even postdocs that lost all of their data simply because their either computer crashed or their computer got stolen, or they did some bad manipulation where they reformatted their hard drive by accident. So this happens. Try to have a mix of different backups. External hard drive, having some cloud storage that you can use for storing the important things. And have a way of recovering this easily. Antivirus tool is also something that should not be underestimated. It's related to reasons why something can break if you have a virus that infests your system. Obviously, video conferencing tools are now, you have to use them every day. Choose whatever is most appropriate. So I use a mix of all of these different tools. And then this is specific in my domain, so maybe it's not relevant for you, but I'm a software developer, so I use collaborative software development tools like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Git, and I use communication tools specifically dedicated to software developers like Slack and some others. So these are like generic tools. I didn't mention Excel and Word, that's obvious. Okay, here it's not Excel and Word, but when I'm preparing papers, I tend to use LaTeX and Overleaf. If you prefer to use Word, that's your choice. The main thing is try to decide what is the best thing for your purpose. In scientific, in most scientific research, we prefer LaTeX because it's required for some publications, but also because it like really speeds up your productivity of writing because there is already like all of these templates available, especially for the bibliography management with BibTeX. It makes your life much more easy. For presentations, you have, of course, lots of different choices. I didn't see PowerPoint in your list here, but any type of presentation tool. This is not complete, of course. PowerPoint, Keynote, Beamer, or other presentation tools. Obviously, you're going to use this for your presentations. So the main message is choose the best one that's most appropriate for your needs. It can be, your needs could be simply based on because it's the best tool available, or because it's simply more logical to use. For example, PowerPoint, everyone is using, so you can easily copy, paste, or reuse some slides from others, even if it's not the best tool around. Bibliographic references, you already mentioned this a lot. So anything, any type of tool like Google Scholar, Mendeley, Zotero, everything that's out there for trying to find back bibliographic references, or the new breed of AI-based tools like this, which are even much better because they allow you to automatically keep track of new papers. It automatically suggests you based on your previous lists to provide new things. I don't know if you are aware of this. I can show you, I have some slides about this. Research Rabbit and Semantic Scholar are things that I've started to use like since 2-3 years, which are extremely useful for me. With this, I can find papers. With this, I store the papers, and I have, for example, with Semantic Scholar, I have a weekly update of everything that is within my domain of research, and I can simply say, okay, please add this to my lists in specific domains. And then, of course, any kind of digital library within your domain of research for any of the publishers where you publish regularly, IEEE, ACM, Springer, Elsevier, or what's there. In principle, you might not need this because Google Scholar knows everything, but sometimes it can be useful. So maybe just some small thing about these AI-based tools, because maybe not all of you are aware of this. But like this, for example, this is Research Rabbit. So this is just a screenshot of what I have taken. So the nice thing about this is that, one thing is that you can classify your papers in specific domains. So here, for example, you can see bots. So I've created a category which is bots, which is I'm doing research in software development bots. So automated tools for helping software developers. Within this domain, I'm collecting all of the papers within that specific domain. So there is, okay, this was when I started doing this. There's only 5 papers, but today I have like 100 papers around. You can easily add papers. And whenever you have a list of papers within that specific domain, it automatically, as you can see here, suggests you what is similar work. It tries to look at similarities of other papers within the same domain. It lists already 383 possibilities. You can simply open this, go over this, and say this is relevant, this is not relevant, and so on. And it starts learning, and whenever you add something, you just have a bigger list. So without having to actively go through Google Scholar and copy-paste all of these things, you get this for free. Similar work are things that you didn't reference to yourself, things that don't reference work in your list, but that are considered similar. Earlier work are things that have been cited in some of the things in your list, and later work are things that cite the things in your list. So you can go backwards in time, you can go forward. This is a really easy way to explore papers within your field of research. Another way to do this is this one. You can see it also generates some kind of, if you want to, a social network, a collaboration graph of everyone in that domain that is doing research. So here I see like some main papers that have been written. So I only have a couple of them. It's not the papers, but the authors. And they are linked to each other to see, okay, we have this network of people that are mostly writing in this domain. Here, for example, you see a cluster of papers written by Wessel. So it seems that this is one of the most important researchers in that field. This could also be useful if you're going in a new field to identify what are the key players in that field. And of course, from this you can export in whatever format you want to. You can even share publicly your list with someone else so that you can work together on creating a list of papers within a particular domain. So that's a natural way of exploring papers within a domain. And for the rest, it works like any other bibliography management tool because you can store your papers, you can annotate your papers, and so on. Another one that is similar but is more textual based, so it doesn't have these fancy graphics, is this one, Semantic Scholar. So you can basically do the same thing. You can classify your papers in different categories. You can easily add papers to it. It has slightly less functionalities than the previous one, but for example here you have this research feed, and in your settings you can say every week report me on the newest publications in this field, and then you can add this little by little. So this is easy for me because rather than having to once a week go and look on the internet for new papers, I just wait until it sends me a mail with new papers. Okay, maybe it doesn't find everything, but it's quite complete. It frequently reports me papers that I would not even have been able to find myself, because it looks in specific, sometimes it looks in specific conferences that I don't even know that existed, and it still reports relevant papers. Then, of course, when you write papers, you have to share your papers, but not only your papers. Any type of research artifact that you're producing, you should preferably share this with other people. So in my case, I'm writing papers, publications, but we are also developing tools in our lab. We are creating data sets. We are creating YouTube videos. We are creating presentations. Do not only share your papers, try to share everything that you make, because this is about open research. Everything that you do, try to share it with others, if you have, of course, the permission, if there is no intellectual property rights or something, or other copyright-related things. The more you share, if it's, of course, don't share something that is bad quality, well, actually ensure that whatever you do is good quality, and then you can share everything you have. And share it through the most appropriate means. So preprints of papers, even if they are not published, and you have the right to do so, you can put them on archive or ResearchGate. Data sets, you will probably use Zenodo or Figshare. Open source software that you're developing, or even closed software, as long as you put the license, you can put this on GitHub or GitLab, and everyone has access to it. Slides, presentations, you can use SlideShare, Speaker Deck. I tend to use all of those. Whenever I have material that I find useful for the community, I will put them available so that other people can build on this information. And as a side effect, it's likely that people are more likely to get to know your work, maybe just because they encounter this data set, and through this they will encounter your papers, or vice versa. And then, of course, try to disseminate your research through other means, like social media channels, LinkedIn, be active on LinkedIn, and through this you can also, whenever you have a new paper, just announce it on LinkedIn, or on Twitter, X, or on YouTube. I didn't put TikTok. I'm not a fan of TikTok. And then this is another one. For example, okay, we have, this is ResearchGate. I don't know if you're aware of ResearchGate. This is like, okay, if you don't like creating your own website, but you still want to share your research, just create a page on ResearchGate. It's for researchers, by researchers. So like here, whenever you have a new paper, just add it there, and you get here the list of all research having been submitted, in this case by myself. So this is my ResearchGate page, and you can see, you can list whatever you want: articles, books, book chapters, conference papers, even data, technical reports, presentations. So it's a kind of vitrine where all of my scientific output is stored in a unique way. The nice thing also is that you can do this by research topic, but also you can have, say, everything related to a particular project. You can bundle it together. You can even say everything related to a particular research lab or a research group. You can bundle it together, so it's really flexible from that point of view. And in addition to this, one of the main reasons why I'm using it is that sometimes you have research articles, like in a journal. We don't have the right to make them publicly available, because we have to respect the copyright of the journal. But you just put them on the ResearchGate, and whenever someone would like to see it, he can just click on some button, ask you for a private copy of the paper, and then you just say, okay, here it is. Yeah, this is like the same. So this is my YouTube channel, where I also try to, I use this both for teaching and research purposes. So whenever there is a useful presentation I gave at some conference, I will probably post it here, and whenever I'm doing something relevant for research or for teaching that is useful to a bigger audience than only my students, then I will also publish it here. So all of this should be seen in the context of open research. I think as a research community, we should make all of our research openly available to the extent possible, because research is about building on the shoulders of other researchers. If you don't have access to what other researchers are doing, you cannot build further on this. If you are not able to verify or replicate what other researchers are doing, you cannot trust that research. So that's why any research, I think, should respect the FAIR principles. I don't know if you know these principles. FAIR is an acronym. If you want to have all the details, just go to this website. But it means like all research should be findable. You should be able to access it, to find it. So yeah, this is the same. First of all, you need to find it. Then you should have access to the research. So you should be able to download it. Interoperable is you should be able, like this is more about replication. If you have some research, you should be able to repeat the research yourself. So all of the information to repeat it by yourself should be available to the extent possible. It's not always possible in specific domains. Maybe you are doing some medical experiment with thousands of patients. I don't think you can easily replicate this, but you can put the methodology available so that someone can maybe with like 2 years of time or maybe 20 years of time do the same thing. And it should be reusable, so everything that allows other people to reproduce research. So everything is more about research reproducibility. How can we make other people benefit from our research and do the same thing themselves or do more things on top of what we just provided. That's why all of your research should be available, not only your papers, but all your datasets and tools. Also, it's a very good practice to use DOI for all of them. So normally, I think for papers, it's now standard. Whenever you have a published paper, there will be a digital object identifier. But the same thing can also be added to datasets and tools. Like if you put something on Zenodo for free, you get the digital object identifier. And like this, you have a unique single identifier for every type of research artifact that you're producing. So consistently use this for referring to your work. About research reproducibility, this was only very specific to my domain of research in software engineering, so I don't think it's relevant here. But it's like, it was a paper in which they studied to which extent the reproducibility of research is improving over time. So they actually looked in some specific conference about, the conference was about software engineering. They tried to assess to which extent papers that have been published in this domain like 15 years ago were reproducible. They tried to reproduce the research and they failed by a large extent for most of them. They did it then more recently and now it's like 80% of the results are actually reproducible. I guess that maybe in the field of software engineering it's easier because you can share software much more easily than other material. But I think that's where we should try to go towards, is to try to make your research as reproducible as possible. To do so, you will have to provide replication packages. So here I realize that I might be becoming a little bit more specific in my domain of research. Okay, replication packages, something that helps someone else to reproduce your research. In the context of my domain, it's easy because a replication package is simply a software package. If you're doing research on a specific machine, I don't think you can package the machine and give it to someone else. But something that provides all of the information that allows someone else to repeat your findings and see whether whatever you did is correct and can be confirmed or refuted if it's not correct. Maybe it's correct, but not in another setting. So maybe they can say in that other setting, it's not the same thing. If you provide such a replication package, of course, it should be as easy as possible for someone else to read it and to reproduce it. So you should be structuring it in the best way possible so that also because maybe things can change over time. You can say, for example, I developed this using this particular version of this software system at this particular date. This is the information that can be found. In any type of research, things are changing, evolving over time. So if I would do the same experiment again, like 1 year later, the data might already have been changed, so it's not always fully reproducible. But if you document it, at least you know what are the constraints that were in place at the moment the experiment was done. If you didn't put this, then maybe someone might say, okay, your research is not correct, but maybe because I'm doing the same thing 2 years later, and the results are different. Is it because the original research was incorrect? No, maybe it's because the research now is done in a different context, and the context has changed. If you provide the context, then you provide more certainty about in which context this research has been conducted. So in my domain, if you talk about replication packages, this would be something like we develop software in Python. So for this we use reproducible notebooks, which we create using JupyterLab. So we develop Python code. It looks something like this. Actually, it's like writing a paper, but this is not a paper. This is like the full code, executable code with all of the images that you will see in the paper. And if someone wants to repeat the experiments, it suffices to just install the notebook, run the notebook, and you get all of the results for free. So the data set will be there, the code will be there, and the results will be there, and you can simply re-execute this, and it should work. So for this, of course, we have to share the paper, we will have to share the notebook, and we will have to share the source code. So for this, we use 3 different mechanisms. The publication itself, on Zenodo the data set, and on GitHub we provide the source code. So of course there is a lot of things you need to do to make your research available, but by doing so anyone else can look into it. If they find a bug in the code, well, they can simply correct it, they can provide a bug report on GitHub and so on. This is specific in the domain of computer science, but it can work in many other domains, having some kind of computational notebook that can help others to reproduce your research. Another practical advice is about collaboration. So that's the social skills. You should try to collaborate as much as possible. So we already mentioned having weekly, hopefully, meetings with your supervisor. More than weekly is not feasible. Maybe bi-weekly meetings, maybe monthly meetings. But if your supervisor is not there, hopefully you're in a team where there's other PhD students. You can hopefully talk with them. If there are no other PhD students in your team, probably there is already 20 PhD students here. You can talk to other PhD students in other fields. It can already be useful as well. Maybe there's other PhD students you know in other universities close by, like say within Belgium. You can also discuss with them regularly if they have mutual interests. And then every opportunity to have collaboration, to talk with other people might be an opportunity for collaborating with them. Write joint papers together, develop some joint tools, create benchmarks and data sets together. Try to seize the opportunity of collaborating if it's possible and if it fits, of course, within your research domain. I already mentioned also the ability to co-organize scientific workshops. If you see this occasion, try to use it. Another way of collaborating, I don't know, but I guess that you will also have, since you're doing high-end research, master students typically might do a master's thesis that would be research-related. So propose topics that master thesis could take, and like this you can actually start practicing your supervision skills, your teaching skills to teach the master students how to do research, and maybe they will become the next PhD student as well. And then maybe if you're doing more industrial-like research, interacting with companies, trying to apply your research in practice could also be very useful. This is not applicable for everyone, but might be useful in your specific context. I don't think that's a no-brainer. Everyone should publish regularly. There's a famous publish or perish thing. But there may be some specific practical advice. Publishing regularly, that's not what you should do. What you should do is publish high-quality research. So if you want to publish, you should try to be as ambitious as possible, but not over-ambitious. Maybe there is like this top conference in your field, like an A-star rated conference, the best you can think of, with acceptance ratio of 5%. Maybe that's too far-fetched if you're a beginning PhD student. Maybe near the end of your PhD, it might be achievable. So try to see whether like you should go for the really top of the conferences, or maybe something that's still in the top but not the highest. So try to aim for quality, not quantity. It's better to have a couple of high-quality papers than lots of shitty papers. And if you can do this, normally in every domain, it might be difficult for you to know what are the top conferences. Ask your advisor or someone that knows, and go for those that are highly rated. So typically, conferences are rated from A-star, which is the highest, then A, then B, then C, and so on. try to forget about the B conferences, go for the A conferences. There is normally, it depends on your domain. Maybe there is not a lot of conferences and maybe you don't have lots of choice. So maybe you have to select some B conferences, but like in my field of research, fortunately we have rankings. I don't know about if this is general for other fields. The core ranking, this is something in Australia. They have conference rankings, so to see whether this also applies for your field of research. When you type, I type the domain software and I see it's all software related conferences. I get this list, I order them by ranking and I can immediately see what are all the research conferences in my field. There is only very few A-star rated conferences. I tend to go for A conferences because they are more achievable by PhD students. So if they are the main researchers, we focus more on them. A is definitely good enough. We don't strive to be the best of the best. We do, but we don't strive for really trying to be here for simple reasons like this conference, for example. If you see, you have to wait for 6 months before you get before even you get an answer. At the same time, you could already have written a paper, have a response from another conference, and resubmit it elsewhere. So it's a kind of trying to find the right balance between going to a high-quality conference but not spending too much time. What happens if the paper gets rejected? You only have a limited time, so try to balance to select the right conferences that are good enough. They used to also have something for journal rankings. Unfortunately, this is discontinued, at least in my domain of research. Maybe this still exists in others. But yeah, we also, like when we write papers, we try to focus on the top A-rated journals as well. Another question is, yeah, what should you go to? Should you try to prefer publish papers in journals or conferences? I cannot make any recommendations. It really depends on the field. In the field of software engineering, there is no difference. You can submit to conferences, you can submit to journals. Maybe if you're going to a university, you want to become a professor, maybe journals might be more important than others because you're competing with other persons in other domains of science, and in other domains, journals are more important. Having a good balance between journal papers and conference papers might be good, but it's really domain specific. When you're doing a PhD, you're facing a couple of challenges. So this is a list of challenges that people have reported in the past. As a PhD student, you can see lots of challenges. I'm pretty sure that whenever you see this list, you can tick several of these boxes already. Yeah, some of them are related to things we already mentioned before, like time management, deadline pressure. Others might be more social or psychology related, lack of confidence, insomnia, emotional events, investment, depression. So yeah, you have lots of challenges that you can have as a PhD student. So here I try to provide some ideas to try to overcome these challenges to the extent possible. It's not always easy. So I already mentioned the good work-life balance. So don't neglect your family or your friends, and especially don't neglect yourself. So have a good balance. Don't only work on your research. Try to do something else. Engage in sports, in cultural activities. Have some holidays. Definitely don't forget about this. This was again related to, I don't know who mentioned it, about feeling negative when someone critiques your work. This actually, you should see any critique on your work as something positive. It's really very important to get criticism. It's only by being criticized about what you're doing that you can improve upon your research. So any criticism that you can consider, that you can get, consider it as positive, because it will challenge you to. If you get criticism, then either it may mean that you didn't do something right, or it may mean that you did something right, but you didn't explain it properly. So whatever the reason for the criticism, there is something you can probably improve upon. Try to express your thoughts better, try to explain your ideas better, try to do better research. So never take criticism personally. Try to take abstraction of yourself, but try to see this is criticism on your work. It's not on you as a person. Take the feedback and try to, if you really don't know, like sometimes you get a paper rejected, lots of criticism. The first time, even anyone will say, okay, why did he do this? I don't agree, but try to step back. Try to also show this feedback to some of your colleagues, and you will start to learn why they provided this criticism and how you could cope with it. There is always something to learn. If it's not relevant, then for me it always means well, we didn't explain what we meant good enough. So try to explain better what you did next time. If the research, you think the research is really relevant, just explain it better next time. If the research is not good enough, try to do the research better next time. So try to see how you can integrate whatever feedback you received. Of course, yeah, another one challenge is doing a PhD. You will probably have noticed it's not a 9-to-5 job. You cannot say, I'm going to the office in the morning, at 5 o'clock I stop, and then my job is done. And after 4 years, automatically I will get a PhD. No, this is again timing related, planning related. It's up to you to plan ahead so that you don't get stuck with deadlines where you only have 2 days left to write a paper that will take 1 week to write, because then you will have to work in the weekend. So that's about procrastination. You can try to fit your research within the time frame that you have by trying to plan everything and try to not avoid doing everything at last minute. I always try to say this to my PhD students, but they not always listen to me in the sense that, okay, I say there is a conference in 4 months from now, you should start writing, and then 1 month before the conference they say maybe we should start writing, and then it's too late. So if you plan ahead, then it will work. If you start too late, it might not always work. I don't know if you can guess what this is about. This is about getting stuck in your research. Actually, this is a quote from another professor that I saw on Twitter. Any research student, any PhD student at any moment in his career will have faced a problem where he doesn't know how to continue. You say, everything I tried, it fails, I'm depressed, I don't know how to continue. So you hit rock bottom and nothing works, everything is hopeless. You always have you have ups and downs. At some point you will reach some downs that are where you think nothing works, but actually this is the biggest learning experience. You will recover. By talking to people, you can try to see what are your struggles, why are you facing this problem, and at the end, the biggest learning experience is recovering from the moments where you don't know how to continue. So it happened to me at least twice in my career as a PhD student. The second time it happened, I basically said I'm going to switch topics, and this was after 2 years. I had fortunately 6 years because I was a teaching assistant. After 2 years I said I'm going to completely switch topics and I'm going to do something else, and this was more successful. Another one that probably should be a separate slide is this one, the imposter syndrome. Everyone is having this, even people like me are having this. You probably have already heard about this. It's like you think there's always people that are better than you. It's like thinking that, like if I'm a software engineer and I have to sometimes explain things about software engineering to people that are like 10 times better software developers than I am. Psychologically, sometimes you can feel isolated as a PhD student. It's difficult to do a PhD. You are on your own. You have to write a PhD, not someone else. So it's a long project. It's mostly you have to do this independently. You can have the help from some others, but you have to write the PhD. You have to do the research. Maybe your advisor is not always as much there to help you as he can. So in that case, again, talk to other people, collaborate with other people. That's probably the best way to not feel isolated. Don't stay in on your own and try to reach out to other people. Also, sometimes, actually, regularly, it could be that your PhD advisor, you have chosen a particular domain of research. You are the expert in this domain of research. Maybe your PhD advisor is not. This happened for me with a guy that I showed you that went to Luxembourg. He was doing a research about virtual reality. I'm not really an expert in this. About architecture, building architecture. I'm not an expert in this. So, he had to develop software. I'm an expert, but like in 60% of the things he was doing, I was not an expert. So that's why he had to seek out collaborations with some external partner to do this. So these were the challenges as PhD students. I still have slides, but this is about after the PhD. So, if now you have a PhD, so let's say everyone here will get a PhD in 2 to 4 years, anywhere between 1 and 4 years. What is next, and what you should do for trying to plan for next? So this is the long-term planning. Okay, that's you have seen. This is the juggling with 25 balls in the air at the same time. Okay, it depends. If you want to go for a professional career, you don't want to stay in academia, then basically what you have to try to value is not the skills of like saying, okay, I have become a world-class domain expert in my very small little field of research. No, professionals, the industry doesn't care about this. Okay, of course you have to be, if you want to go in a company that works in this specific domain, but what is much more valued is all of the transversal skills that you have obtained. So anything that you have done, all of these skills that we talked about the previous time, these are the really things that you learned during your PhD. So this one small thing, being an expert, is probably relevant, but all of these other things are equally relevant. Writing a CV for a company is totally different from writing a CV in an academic context. If you want to stay in an academic career, then probably you will first have to do a small, shorter postdoc research, maybe a couple of years before you can actually become an academic. You have to realize that it's really not a lot of room available in the academic context to become a full-time appointed academic researcher. So this might be challenging, so be aware of this. Postdoc is not extremely difficult to obtain, but it's limited in time. So, but to do this, again, you have to try to become better in organizing things. So as a PhD student, you might not be able to organize conferences or become a reviewer or something. Here you can do this. Continue having real collaborations, expand your network, be involved in teaching. Actually, start applying for research projects. As a PhD student, you cannot apply for research projects. As a postdoc, you should apply for research projects. So there is many more things you can do when you start doing a postdoc. So it's about like finding new balls that you can start throwing around in the air. So the main thing is like getting involved in the community by actually, and now it's more like the organization. Start organizing or help in organizing conferences, workshops, and so on by becoming part of the program committee or any other role in organization. Scientific journals, become a reviewer, start reviewing, which might not always be possible as a PhD student, but which becomes possible as a postdoc. Start creating maybe your own scientific workshops. This is something I actively did when I started becoming a postdoc. I was an expert in my field of research, and I say, let's start a workshop in a big conference on this domain of research. And this is actually how I started my field this was about software evolution. And this was really successful, and this is how I got to know people and how people got to know me. Maybe there is an opportunity to provide tutorials, so you have been expert in a specific domain. Maybe you want to share this through some tutorial to the other persons within the academic community, or something like hackathons. I don't know, I'm just providing some ideas that might work or not in your context, or any other things you can think of that can help you to help other researchers or to help you become more visible within the research community. Obviously, publishing your results, but this is also already something that you did before, but maybe now you can take more time to increase the diversity of what you're publishing. Before it was just like maybe some papers in conferences, maybe occasionally in some journals, but now you can probably do some other stuff, like you know now the perfect state of the art or state of the research, so maybe there is a possibility to write some survey about everything that happens in your domain of research. Now you have become the expert. Write about what are the research challenges in your domain. During 4 years you have known about all the problems, so you can write up about this. There is sometimes specific journals, like in my domain it's the ACM Computing Surveys, which is even A-star journal, where you can publish these types of things. These types of things are things that you typically don't write when you're a PhD student, but once you acquire all the knowledge, you can start publishing these types of things. And the good thing is that it actually will boost your citation count enormously. I didn't know about this when I started doing this, but if you look here, if you see the number of citations and you see the topics of the papers, a survey of 1,700 citations, a taxonomy of more than 1,000 citations, a state-of-the-art survey on introduction, on taxonomy of, if I list all of the most popular papers or articles or chapters I wrote, those that have the most citations are those that are surveys, taxonomies, introductions to a specific theme. I never intended to have these papers. I think the most useful things are the things where I actually have a research contribution. But those things that people want to read are things where you are an expert and you want to show them, okay, what is the things going on in this field of research. And these are the things that actually get cited more. Yeah, sometimes also like these things can also be useful. Occasionally you will see special issues for a specific topic, maybe in some more vulgarizing theme like a magazine, not a journal. So in that case, if you see something like this, why not also contribute to these types of things? It's another type of public than the normal, regular scientific papers. Or even, why not consider to publish books in your domain. As a postdoc, you have the time to do this. The first one here, this is what I did while I was doing my postdoc. I didn't write the book by myself. I said, I'm not the best person to write a book of an entire topic that covers this entire field on my own. It's a book with invited chapters with all of the experts in my domain. I also have a couple of chapters in it, and together we have a compilation of book topics within this domain. And again, this is something that became one of the things through which I became known, and it's another way of publishing information than the regular conferences or journals. So think out of the box and try to see whether you can also contribute in this particular way. My goal was not here to say, let's have a book and get more citations. It's about, let's get people to know this domain so that they can work further and they know what's going on in this domain. Yeah. So, okay, you can also collaborate in many different ways. So you can write books together, you can develop software tools together, you can create data sets, benchmarks together. All of these things are, typically that's also once you become an expert researcher, having benchmarks or data sets that you can share with others can be really an easy and useful way to collaborate with other persons. Or even be involved in interdisciplinary research. You don't have to stick within your own specific niche. Try to see whether you can extend this to other domains of research. And of course, once you are a postdoc, then hopefully you will have more time to get involved in teaching. So that's also something. If you want to have an academic career, it's important to have teaching experience because they will look at, okay, you're a good researcher, but are you also a good teacher? If you don't have any teaching experience, you might not get hired simply because you don't have teaching experience. So don't forget to do this as well if you want to go to an academic career, except if maybe there's opportunity to be, I don't know, FNRS chercheur qualifié, which is 100% funded, but you have a very, very small chance of getting it. So try to at least open your chances by also doing these other things. So that's about teaching, and the other is about research funding. Trying to apply for research funding for yourself or for others. Maybe even already during your PhD, you want to get a postdoc, there is no funding, try to get it yourself. For example, you have these Marie Curie actions. We have these specific actions in the context of UMONS. We had these postdoc schemes as well. These allow you to apply for postdoc funding. There is lots of different programs. It changes every year, but there is funding for getting a postdoc. So try to go for this yourself if you want to do a postdoc first. And then you can even be more advanced if you want to go for more advanced funding. Really top of the top, go for this European Research Council, the ERC starting grants, which is the lowest level. It's really highly competitive, but this doesn't mean that you cannot get it. Try to see whether you do this. Actually, you can see here, talented early career scientists with excellent supervised work. Why not applying for those things? Try to be ambitious. If it doesn't work, try to reuse whatever you submitted for somewhere else. There is lots of different types of project funding that you can apply for, and try to do this by not doing it isolated in your own team, but also to collaborate with other persons, maybe some inter-faculty research project, inter-university research project, or even an international or interdisciplinary research project. And then, of course, don't despair. Sometimes you can get an excellent rating for your project, excellent, A, and then you get rejection due to lack of financial means. This happens. It's not because you have an excellent project that it will get funded. So if this happens, yeah, don't despair. Try again next time. Resubmit it somewhere else. These are the things in life that happen. And yeah, once you have this postdoc career experience, then you can start trying to look for tenure track positions. Don't try to focus too narrowly. You say, I only want to have a position here locally in Mons. Probably you will have much less chances if you say, I want to do it somewhere in Belgium. or somewhere in Europe, or even in the entire world. So for me, for example, again, some experience. When I started looking for a permanent position, I only looked in Flanders. So there's 5 different universities. I said, no problem. I applied for 5 different places. It didn't really work, so I said, okay, let's go a little bit further. And I started looking in Wallonia as well, 3 different universities. And then I got the position, but just being too local didn't work. So yeah, that's I think all I have to say. So the conclusion is, yeah, this is what you should try to become. And the balls just replace this by any of these skills. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.